if we do it for ourselves or only a P&L, if we don't have a real purpose, it's not going to work. This is essential. I really hate sometimes when we try to differentiate about purposes and values and then execution, like a mechanic tool. It is not. We need tools, we need knowledge, we need methods. And we need to be rigid and strict sometimes, but especially we need to put our passion. And the only way of putting our real passion in something is because we have a real driven purpose that is going to connect ourselves with what we are doing. And this purpose has to be shared with the others. That means leadership. So it is not about ourselves. It's about the people believing in something that is really worthwhile.
Welcome to the How to Not Execute Your Strategy podcast. I'm your host, Tim Ojai. This podcast is dedicated to the biggest lessons learned from the people who own strategic execution, the senior leaders who live in the center of it. My guest today is Dr. Emilio Herrera, the Chief Health Officer of Keralty. See the show notes for more information about Emilio and to also get access to the leader guide for this episode. Let's get to it. Emilio, welcome to the podcast. I'm very excited to have this conversation with you. You've been on my targeted list for a year now, and I'm glad that our schedules could align so we could do this. Welcome.
Thank you so very much for having me here, Tim.
So I've already given your bio and the introductions. I want to touch on it. Normally I go right into the questions, but for this discussion, I want to take a moment. You're from Spain. You work for one of the largest healthcare providers in Latin America. Now you're working on helping tilt up operations in the United States. So you're coming outside in, but your background is a physician. And how do you go from palliative care and studies at MD Anderson to being the chief healthcare officer for a large organization and creating strategy for thousands and thousands of people to execute?
I think, trying to make long story short, at the end, I came into the management setting trying to transform what I think was a healthcare system that was upside down. I'm a specialist in family medicine, and then I got also a specialization in palliative care. So being involved in taking care of those ones who were suffering the most, trying to alleviate their suffering and understanding that there are many other conditions, not only the medical conditions involved in the well-being of people, made me understood that there should be many other elements involved in people's well-being to provide a more comprehensive model of care to people. But it was not thought like that. I mean, I just directly came into that, just looking for solutions and trying to help contributing and creating solutions to help people who were suffering. That was all.
So you basically, you're a physician. And for those who don't know, would you please give a brief explanation of palliative care?
Yeah, palliative care is providing excellent care to those people who are in limited expectations of life, meaning that they are suffering a lot, they are having symptoms, not only pain, also shortness of breath, anxiety, depression, and then you specialize being an expert in helping control the symptoms that they are having. So we work not only with patients, but also with their families and caregivers to try to control physically all the symptoms that they are having and then to go through such a difficult period.
So you specialized in what I would call a true systemic medicine, where you're looking at the individual, but you're also looking at their entire social system, their relationships, the emotional energy. And as a guy who's walked the leukemia path with my Diana, but you took that, we'll call it that expertise in medicine, and you then went galactic. I mean, you went to the whole system. How do we change the whole mindset about how we do this? Because it's not just about taking care of an individual. And the reason I'm highlighting this is because you take this perspective into how you define strategy as an executive for the whole company, because you don't think small, you think huge, right?
That is right. But the solution has to be big and has to be huge. And this is the challenge, the main challenge there. I was practicing family medicine, but I fall in love with palliative care in the moment I have a family problem with my grandmother. This was the moment I could say I become a doctor in the classical perspective and the humanistic perspective of the word. And then I started understanding the complexity of that. I had been taught to understand medicine as the way of giving brilliant results, brilliant diagnosis, and curing people. And then I understood that we are all going to die. We're all going to pass away. So medicine is more being besides the people whenever they need us, providing the best care possible, the best of our science, but especially the best of ourselves as human beings to help them to improve as much as possible. But then I wondered something that was crucial in my life that was, hey, and why this that is so important for me now, this that has been a leverage for me to understand that medicine has to be a different concept. Why is not translated? Why is not transferred to the other specialties? Why my colleagues who are in the hospital are maybe thinking that I'm the worst doctor in the hospital because all my patients are going to die, right? And then you have to say, no, we are all with patients who are going to pass away because we are going to pass away also. But I want to stay there in the crucial moment they need me. So these moments of understanding and looking at our eyes is the moment where you understand what means practice medicine, and especially being a human being as the best expression you can have of yourself to help others. So the reality is that transferring that knowledge or that perspective, that approach to other specialties is not something so simple, because at the end, the system is fragmented. The specialties are fragmented. We are not really looking to take care together for the people. Somehow we are more developing our own specialties, our own purposes, personal purposes.
This is a great segue into, tell us about a time where you had a strategy that did not go as planned, and what did you learn?
Well, one of the problems initially is that we were not focusing in the same approach and we were not seeing the same problem. So let's say that in my case, if we talk about a person that we can multiply as a cohort of like a population, right? We have more elderly people now in our society. More elderly people by default has more chronic conditions. More chronic conditions means more dependency. So you have more, let's say, load of care. You need more care because you are dependent and you have chronic conditions. And the problem is that we have less caregivers in our families. Our society somehow is in a real social crisis. So for that, Surgeon General here in the States several months ago published a beautiful work talking about the pandemic of loneliness. And that's the reality. We have a problem. We have more elderly people, more chronic conditions, more disabilities and dependency as a result of that. And we have less people to take care of ourselves at home. So we have a crisis, because the problem is that when you don't have someone to take care of you at home, to take care for your personal care, you go to the hospital. And that costs more than 16 times more than being taken care at home.
Wow.
So the system is upside down. And then the thing is that we don't have enough money to develop social care services to help the social change that we are having in our families.
Wow.
The reality is that we need to flip the way we are understanding what the health problems of our general population is. How to create the same vision you were asking for. When you put that concrete case in front of people, no one could deny that, because it was so very clear. It is what we are seeing in our homes. So when you see that at home, you say, yes, that's exactly my same situation. Okay, so we are seeing that in all the society. How can we, and when I'm saying now we were two different groups, social care services and healthcare services, work together in order to try to help in that huge situation? Because if we don't solve that, we're going to be in a bankruptcy, as we internationally are usually in the healthcare systems, because we cannot afford the huge cost that we have.
So I want to pause here, because this is such an essential, vital concept that everyone needs to understand, is that this idea of, do we have the same definition of the problem, yes or no, is going to lead to the scope of our efforts of what we're trying to do, 100%. And when I say that, I mean specifically, if I see the problem as something that just needs to be fixed, I use the word optimized, then I will direct my team I will allocate all the resources that I have access to fix the problem. You're talking about a completely different scope in terms of transformation. We've never done it this way before. We're going to break things. We're not going to fix things yet. We're going to break them first, then we'll fix them later. So I need you as a leader to take all of your decision making, all of your resources, all of the energy that you bring to this strategy and help us think that way. Am I clearly summarizing this the way that you think in terms of your own people?
Yeah, because in fact it was a problem, and I love what you said, because this was exactly my problem. My problem
Mm,
was that this was like a general condition that everyone agreed on, but that no one had a clear evidence-based solution to go for.
right.
So at the end, it was about credibility. So creating credibility, even when you have a lack of evidence that these solutions is going to work, is essential in order to ask the people to come with you in order to make the change you need. It's about defining very well a challenge that can be somehow involving the lives of people, something that they can say, hey, this is undeniable. That's true. And then once you define the challenge, then you say, okay, if this is the challenge and this is the situation we have, and this should be the ideal solution, then what if we go towards that mission together that is going to solve our problem?
Mm.
When you have evidence, it is easier because you have the numbers. But if not, you have to be building the solution while you are driving. And that's a difficulty unless you get the trust and the credibility of people.
What you said, I think, is important to call out that if you have evidence, if you have proof that this is what we need to do and why we're doing it, it's easier to pull everybody in. If you don't have that, but you know in your gut that this is the direction we need to go, I've made that decision, you then have to create that evidence. You have to generate that proof as you go so that people start to sign up, volunteer.
Exactly.
And you'll have some that jump in right away, and you'll have some that will sit on the fence and some that will fight you every step of the way. But you've got to use that journey, that execution, in order to build the trust and to build the credibility you're talking about, correct?
Exactly like that, Tim. And my point is that I was reading one of the Harvard Business Review this past winter, 2023, that was about trust. And
Mm,
this is a wonderful, wonderful article there written by Francis Frey and Anne Morris. They talk that if you want to create trust, and I think that summarizes very well the point, you need to create authenticity. You need to demonstrate logic. That means that you know what you have to do. And then is demonstrating empathy for the people. You need to demonstrate that who you are and what you are doing, and this is exactly yourself. So
mm,
that means to be trustworthy. Second, you need to demonstrate that you know how to do it, what you are doing. That means somehow to be reliable and then to be empathetic. So when people really feel that they matter, then is the moment you say, okay, so we are doing that together for ourselves together. It's not for my objectives, it's
yeah.
our objectives. So let's go for that. But that being said, the problem is that when you don't have the evidence, as you said, you have to be demonstrating that step by step. It's about not, you can be planning whatever, you can be having the strategy, but then once you are implementing and executing that, you need to be demonstrating the impact that you are creating
Yeah.
constantly. You have
Yeah.
to be evaluating and focusing on the impact that you are generating for the people to get the reinforced that they are doing the right way.
I'm thinking of so many situations that either I have watched from a distance or even have personally been involved where leaders are, quote, executing a strategy, but not generating any evidence, no measurable impact whatsoever. They're just ticking the box, going down the checklist and doing what they were supposed to do. I have literally watched those strategies stall, just completely lose all momentum. And then eventually the people on the team lose their passion, lose their energy to stay committed to doing the work. And then they're just showing up and just ticking the box. Hey, if you're enjoying this conversation, I want to encourage you to go to timohai.com/blog now and get the leader guide. It's an awesome way to allow me to both coach you personally through deeper reflection and to also open up the dialogue with your team. All right, back to the interview. And the leaders then either, and this is the pattern I've seen, I'm curious if you have to manage against this yourself, the leaders either change the strategy, go, well, it's not working, may have been the right strategy, but they're going to change because they're not seeing measurable impact. Or that leader's gone, you bring somebody else in and they generate a strategy. But regardless, no one sticks with the old strategy and recognizes the problem as an execution problem. They always think it's a strategy problem and let's go fix that. And what I'm hearing you say is the execution, if you don't do it right, that doesn't matter what the strategy is. Is that
Exactly.
fair? Okay.
Yeah. And the thing is that sometimes it doesn't mean that you're going to find the exact result you were looking for, because in fact, you didn't know the way previously,
Yeah.
right? So you need to roll the dice. You need to try and try again, but then you need to know the figure you're looking for when you are rolling the dice. Hey, I'm looking for this red figure or whatever. I'm going to persist on that, evaluating if I'm doing the right thing or not, and if I'm doing that right. We need discipline. We're not going to get the results very first moment. We need to insist on that, but it's about consistency and looking for the good results, and especially being open-minded with our people to understand where the nuances are. I think that you said something very important there. I think that as leaders, we cannot be, let's say, professional executors only. I mean, from my perspective, the most difficult part here in leadership is the human factor. And human factor is essential making changes.
Yeah.
For that, trust is so important. If you don't have the credibility, you're not going to help anyone to understand and to believe in you and to believe in what we are doing together. So it's about helping people to flourish.
Yeah. I want to summarize what's been said here for a little bit, because there literally is so much that we could just sit on each individual bit. If I were to summarize, it's this idea that if you're going to, and the lesson you've learned from trying to drive a transformation and implement that strategy is a couple of things. One, you've got to get everybody to clearly have the same definition of the problem, because if they don't, they are literally solving something else. And if they're solving something else, they're making decisions and using their resources and directing their people in directions that are not aligned with actually solving the problem. Two, you've also talked at depth about this idea that when you have that understanding, it has to translate into everybody being able to make good decisions, so that you're not the choke point or the only person who can make those decisions. You've got to trust that people can do that, which then opens the door to this idea. Probably the biggest point is that trust is the essential ingredient for the whole thing to work. Because if there is no trust for you, for them for you, etc., the human factor, which is, I say everything looks great on paper until people get involved, right? So let's figure out the part of this. The human factor is the key to strategic execution, because without tapping into those core psychological truths, your business best practices will not work. That's what I hear you saying.
Exactly. I mean, we're talking about the importance of the human factor to do the change management, because somehow as leaders, we are change managers. The reality is that we need the good definition of the problem. We need the agreement in the problem. We need the commitment of our people. We need to develop and to increase that commitment with trust in us. But trust is not going to come magically. We need to work in that for that to happen day by day, in order to collect all the possibilities of everyone and their intention to come with us on board in order for that to happen. Demonstrate every single day that you are trustworthy. Demonstrate every single day that you know what to do, being reliable, and demonstrate that you really care your people is essential as the foundation of that. Then you got to work in that daily, right? Because it is of the people, with the people, and for the people. It's not for ourselves. The reality is that if we were contributing for others, that's going to flourish, because the universe is going to conspire for that. On the contrary, if we do it for ourselves, or only a P&L, if we don't have a real purpose, it's not going to work. This is essential. I really hate sometimes when we try to differentiate about purposes and values and then execution, like a mechanic tool. It is not. We need tools, we need knowledge, we need methods. And we need to be rigid and strict sometimes, but especially we need to put our passion. And the only way of putting our real passion in something is because we have a real driven purpose that is going to connect ourselves with what we are doing. And this purpose has to be shared with the others. That means leadership. So it is not about ourselves. It's about the people believing in something that is really worthwhile.
That's excellent. If I were to, again, go back, you talked about this is what leaders have to do, but I'm guessing that you think everyone should demonstrate authenticity. Everyone should bring logic and their expertise to what they do. What was the third thing that you mentioned?
Empathy.
To demonstrate that you truly care. So if I bring authenticity, and that's authenticity is a transparency, I'll go one step further and suggest that it's voluntary. So we become authentic because we volunteer to be authentic. And then the logic that we're bringing, the way we think, the soundness of that logic, but also I would say the expertise that we demonstrate through that process. And then the empathy is that relational, I'll call it the glue that pulls things together. You need all three of those as you pursue measurable impact so that when you're generating evidence, it's done with authenticity, it's done with logic, and it's done with empathy. Is that accurate to you?
Exactly like that. And then we will be able to overcome resistance to change.
Wow.
If we don't have all these elements in place, we won't be able to break the barriers. Because as you said, and I can only agree with you, Tim, the main barriers are the human factors.
Yeah.
We can't have the plan you want.
Wow.
You don't have the people who follows the idea, who put themselves in that, who put their passion in that. We're not going to get it. And the only way of really getting that is being honest. You really need to listen actively your people. And to listen actively to someone means to be able to change your position once you hear the other person, when you listen the other person.
This is a big thing for leaders, and I want to camp on this a little bit longer because as a leader, you'll hear all kinds of stuff. You'll hear stuff that's right. You'll hear stuff that's wrong. You'll hear stuff that's kind of right, but it's also kind of wrong. How do you discern what is, we'll call it accurate, and what is not as a leader? Because you've got your own direct reports who are giving you information, and the reality is they often filter what they tell you. You've got your peers who have their perspective, but also the information that's been filtered to them. And then you've got, and I know your reputation within your organization is you will talk with anybody happily and you're very approachable. So you could have a nurse, you could have a coordinator just walk up to you and say, hey, can I talk to you? And I know you'll listen. How do you separate all of that data and turn it into something that's a genuine insight?
I think that there are many elements involved in what you said, because sometimes there is not only one truth. It's also about perspectives. I can tell you that we are all living the same situations where we're having people with opposite approaches to the same problem. And when you put in their shoes, they're both right. Then I think that our conditions as leaders has to be, let's take care and take the solid facts initially to evaluate from the objective point of view what could be going on, measuring and evaluating also, and really the results of that, the outcomes of the situation. Sometimes we make mistakes. It is about also compassionate leadership. That means to be able to understand, for example, how and what kind of mistakes we go through, and then to understand the conditions that have been affecting us in that situation and to solve the situation for the future. So that means that building credibility and trust on ourselves also, and try to put together those ones who have even opposite opinions about a fact to say, okay, how could we do that together in order to contribute with the best of both sides, in order to get a better solution for the future? because I'm sure it's going to be repeated.
I love it. So it's a combination of both balancing the data with the emotion and bringing them together until it's almost like, in my mind, I was picturing a Venn diagram where the circles are overlapping and finding the part that overlaps. And when you see that overlap, that's what you're going to seize on. And then to your original point, you take what's in that overlap and you change your perspective, your behavior, your style, your strategy based on what is justified in that space, so that, and I talk about execution as more around a navigation. It's never a straight line. It's always about when do we make the right turn? And you're going to make those turns in a way that continues towards the outcome, but you're also generating more authenticity, logic, and empathy for the whole organization.
Exactly. And for the team itself, for the team.
Yeah.
Because at the end, I'm sure that legacy is important. I really love every time I'm working in an organization and I see the moment in which I say, you know what? I'm not really needed here anymore.
Yeah.
They know what to do, how to do it. Yeah. We have worked for that together. We have been getting better people, better than ourselves, in order to make that happen. We have been able to help them to understand each other's, how to work as a team for a common purpose. In the moment that's working on, probably is the time for ourselves as leaders to look for another place to contribute. Not because I'm tired about that mission, because we are sure that these people is going to achieve the goal by themselves. So let's help others to get this kind of solution. I think that one very important point in what you say, I love what you say regarding data and emotions, because sometimes we tend to try to define leaders are more objectives or more emotional. I think it is about balance. And we cannot talk without numbers and data and accuracy, but we need to understand the human factor very well. And the best way to understand that is to consider the shared humanity. We are all the same. We all want the same thing.
Yeah.
And so it's about, what happened here. And it is about, for example, not focusing on the problem and who was fault of. I think it's about, let's focus on the future. Let's understand how we could do it better in the future. So it's not about who failed. It's about how we're going to contribute together for the next time, for that not to be repeated.
So good. Emilio, I know we could go on and on. This has been a fantastic conversation. There's been so many excellent things shared. Thank you for being on this podcast and for sharing your wisdom and experience and your unique perspective that I think should be copied by many, many others.
Thank you so very much for this time. I really appreciate it, Tim. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed that episode and have some solid takeaways. Here are 3 that I want to highlight. 1, just as in medicine, we cannot simply justify everything we do by the outcomes we deliver. The system that produces the outcome is equally important to the strategy. If we ignore this truth, we will eventually cause harm. 2, everyone must see the same problem and focus on taking the same approach. How we define the scope of the problem is absolutely essential to how everyone will define their goals and their roles for every decision they are going to make. 3, the human factor is the key to strategic execution. This means that trust and credibility become your foundation as a leader when you are trying to get the organization to change. But even with trust and credibility established, everyone still needs evidence that the new strategy is working. Without this proof, whatever trust and credibility you have will erode during execution. If you enjoyed this episode, there are 3 things that I would ask of you. First, please share it with at least one person. Second, hit those rating stars on whatever platform you downloaded this podcast. When you do that, it raises the visibility of what we are talking about to people just like you. Third, follow me on LinkedIn and Meta, especially on Instagram at Tim_Ojai. You'll get even more content that will both challenge and inspire you. Holomua. Onward and upward.